On their wedding anniversary, he slid divorce papers across the table and told his wife it was over. But instead of breaking down, she smiled, signed her name, and made one phone call. That single call would ruin his life forever. Because she wasn't the weak woman he thought she was. She was something far more powerful. Before we continue, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe for more stories like this. The restaurant was one of those places where everything whispered of romance. Soft golden chandeliers glowed overhead, reflecting in the polished wine glasses. A pianist at the corner played a gentle tune, filling the air with an elegant hum. The smell of roasted garlic, butter, and grilled steak floated around, making every table feel like a special occasion. Esther Cooper adjusted her silver bracelet and looked across the table at her husband, Harris Cooper, her husband of 7 years. Her face softened as she studied him, hoping tonight would feel like old times. Their anniversary wasn't just a date to her, it was a reminder of the vows they had spoken in front of family and friends. She had chosen a midnight blue dress that matched her calm demeanor. Harris, on the other hand, looked restless. He checked his watch twice within the span of a minute. He fiddled with his napkin. His eyes darted around the restaurant instead of lingering on her. "Harris," Esther said gently, her voice carrying a mix of warmth and nervous hope. "You've hardly touched your food. Is everything okay?" Harris cleared his throat. He gave a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm fine, Esther. Really. I've been thinking a lot lately." Esther leaned forward. "Thinking about what?" He inhaled deeply and set his fork down. The weight of what he was about to say sat heavy in the air. Then, with a practiced hand, he pulled a crisp envelope from his jacket pocket and laid it flat on the white tablecloth between them. Esther blinked. "What's this?" "Divorce papers," Harris said, his tone as smooth as if he were simply ordering dessert. The clink of glasses and hum of piano music suddenly seemed distant. Esther's fingers lingered on the edge of the envelope, but she didn't open it. Instead, she looked up, straight into his eyes. "Divorce? On our anniversary?" Harris exhaled, as though relieved to finally get the words out. "Yes. Esther, I can't do this anymore. I feel trapped. I want something different. We've grown apart, and he hesitated for just a second before saying it, "I found someone else." The words stabbed through the air like shards of glass. Esther's lips parted slightly, but no sound came out for a long moment. She could have screamed. She could have demanded explanations. She could have begged him to reconsider. Instead, she slowly leaned back into her chair, her expression unreadable. "You're divorcing me, here? Now? On our anniversary?" Her voice was calm, almost too calm. Harris shifted uncomfortably. He expected tears, drama, maybe even her storming out. He had rehearsed for that. But her composure threw him off balance. "It's better this way," he muttered. "Dragging this on would only make it worse." "Sophie." Esther raised a hand, cutting him off. "Don't. I don't need to hear her name tonight." The quiet authority in her voice startled him. The waitress approached just then with a small cake topped with candles, smiling as she sang softly, "Happy anniversary," before realizing the icy tension at the table. Harris waved her off awkwardly, and the cake was whisked away without a word. Esther finally touched the envelope, sliding it closer to her. But instead of opening it, she gave a faint smile. "You really think this will break me, Harris?" she asked softly. Harris frowned. "Esther, don't make this harder than it has to be. We both know I'm right. You'll thank me one day." But she didn't argue. She didn't beg. She didn't even look wounded anymore. Instead, she rose gracefully from her chair, clutching her phone. "Excuse me. I need to make a call." Harris opened his mouth to stop her, but no words came. He simply watched as his wife, no, his soon-to-be ex-wife, walked calmly across the room and stepped into the dimly lit hallway near the restrooms. He leaned back in his chair, shaking his head. "She's taking this too well," he muttered to himself. He had no idea that his world was about to tilt on its axis. The hallway outside the dining room was quieter, filled with soft wall lights and framed paintings. Esther stepped away from the faint hum of piano music, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. She stopped near a window where the city lights sparkled against the night sky and pulled out her phone. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't tremble. When she dialed, she knew exactly who to call. The line clicked, and a deep, steady voice answered. "Good evening, Ms. Harrison." Esther closed her eyes briefly. That name. Harrison. Her real name. The name she had tucked away and buried when she married Harris Cooper. "It's time," Esther said simply. There was a pause, then the voice replied, "Are you sure?" "Yes," she answered, her voice steady. "Pull everything out. I won't need the Cooper name anymore." "Understood. I'll prepare the statements and contact the board. By morning, everything will be in motion." "Thank you, Mr. Grant," Esther said softly before hanging up. She took a deep breath and glanced at her reflection in the glass. Her expression was composed, but her eyes, those told a different story. There was hurt there, sharp and raw. But beneath the hurt, there was also something else. Strength. She whispered to herself, "You wanted freedom, Harris. You'll have it. But you'll regret the way you asked for it." Back at the table, Harris was sipping his wine with a smug expression. He looked up when she returned and smirked slightly. "So? You're not going to cry? Not even angry?" Esther slid back into her chair gracefully. "No, Harris. You want a divorce? You'll have it. I'll sign the papers." He blinked. "Just like that?" "Just like that," she repeated, her faint smile never wavering. For a second, his confidence faltered. He had prepared for resistance. He had prepared for begging. He had prepared for her to cling. He hadn't prepared for this unsettling calm. "Well, good," he said after a pause, forcing his arrogance back into place. "It's the right choice. You'll see. Sophie and I—" "Harris," Esther interrupted gently, "please, don't ruin this dinner any further by saying her name again." His jaw tightened, but he stayed quiet. The silence stretched between them, heavy and cold. The pianist shifted to a livelier tune, but at their table, it felt like the music belonged to another world entirely. Esther finally reached out and tapped the envelope. "I'll read this later. For now, let's just finish dinner." "You want to eat? After what I just told you?" Harris asked, bewildered. "Yes," Esther said, picking up her fork calmly. "It's still our anniversary, Harris. The last one we'll ever have. I want to remember it." Her words chilled him in a way he couldn't explain. He stared at her across the table, wondering why she wasn't broken, why she wasn't clinging to him. Deep down, a flicker of unease stirred inside him. But he pushed it down. "She'll crumble later," he told himself silently. "She has to." But Esther's faint smile never faltered. Because she knew something Harris didn't. Something that would change everything. The next morning, Harris left early. Esther heard the front door slam and the engine of his car roar away. She sat alone at the breakfast table, staring at the untouched cup of tea in front of her. The night before replayed in her mind in sharp flashes, his smug expression as he pushed the envelope toward her, the casual cruelty of telling her about Sophie on their anniversary, and the way he had assumed she'd collapse under the weight of his betrayal. Instead, she had smiled. She had made the call. Now, the stillness of the house gave her space to breathe, to think. Esther walked into her study, a room Harris rarely entered. The oak shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, filled with books, documents, and hidden compartments. She slid her fingers across a row of leather-bound classics until they landed on one in particular, The Great Gatsby. Pulling it forward, a hidden latch clicked, and the panel beside the shelf opened slightly. Inside was a locked drawer. Esther took a small key from the chain around her neck and opened it. Neatly stacked files and envelopes waited inside. Letters with embossed seals. Bank statements. Property deeds. At the very top sat a photograph. A black and white picture of her father, William Harrison, smiling beside her when she was younger. "Daddy," she whispered, brushing her thumb over the picture. "You always said I should live on my own terms. I tried. I really tried." Her father had built Harrison Enterprises from the ground up. A company worth billions now, with holdings across real estate, technology, and finance. When he passed, the world assumed his fortune had gone to distant relatives or was tied up in trusts. Few people realized that his only child, Esther Harrison, was the silent owner of it all. When she met Harris Cooper, she had been tired of people treating her like a bank, a status symbol, or a stepping stone. Harris had seemed normal, ambitious, charming, and untainted by the lure of money. She thought his love had been genuine. So, she hid the truth. She used her mother's maiden name, Cooper, and lived quietly. She wanted to build a marriage on love, not wealth. Now, sitting with the documents spread out before her, she realized the bitter irony. He had betrayed her, not knowing who she truly was. Esther picked up her phone again and called Mr. Grant, her father's trusted lawyer who had managed her affairs for years. "Ms. Harrison," he answered promptly, his voice deep and calm. "I'm ready to step back in," Esther said firmly. "Unfreeze all accounts. Move the properties into my primary name. And schedule a board meeting. I'll attend in person." There was a pause. Then Mr. Grant replied, "Of course. The world will soon remember who you are." Esther exhaled slowly. She didn't want revenge, not yet. But she wanted freedom, dignity, and a reminder to Harris Cooper that he had thrown away far more than he could ever grasp. She put the papers away, locked the drawer, and closed the hidden compartment. Tonight, she thought, Harris would come home to Sophie's perfume lingering on his shirt, his lies trailing behind him. He would think she was broken. He would think he had won. But he was already losing. He just didn't know it yet. Sophie Turner flipped her hair as she adjusted her lipstick in the compact mirror. She was seated in a trendy cafe, waiting impatiently for Harris. The young woman's beauty was undeniable, sharp cheekbones, glossy curls, and an air of someone used to getting attention. But behind the polish, there was calculation in her eyes. When Harris finally walked in, Sophie's face lit up in a smile that was equal parts sweet and triumphant. "Harris," she said, leaning in as he kissed her cheek. "Did you do it?" Harris sank into the seat across from her with a sigh. "Yeah. Last night. Gave her the papers." Sophie clapped her hands quietly, excitement bubbling out. "Finally. So, how did she react? Did she cry? Beg you to stay?" Harris frowned. "No. She didn't react at all. She just smiled and said she'd sign them. Can you believe that?" Sophie tilted her head, curiosity piqued. That's strange. You've been married for 7 years, Harris. Women don't just smile when their husband leaves them." "I know," Harris muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "It threw me off. But maybe she's in shock. She'll fall apart later, I'm sure." Sophie leaned forward, resting her chin on her palm. "Well, as long as she signs them. That's all that matters. Once it's official, we can finally start our life together. Imagine it, no more sneaking around, no more pretending. Just us." Harris smiled faintly at her enthusiasm. He liked how Sophie made him feel, young, desired, important. With Esther, he always felt like he was standing in someone's shadow, though he couldn't explain why. Sophie worshipped him. Esther had always looked at him with quiet eyes, as though she saw something he didn't. "I'll make it quick," Harris said confidently. "She'll have the papers signed within a week." Sophie sipped her latte and lowered her voice. "Good. Because honestly, Harris, if she fights this, I don't know how long I can wait. I've already put up with months of sneaking around. I want all of you." "You have me," Harris assured her. But even as he spoke, something in his chest shifted uncomfortably. Esther's faint smile haunted him. Later that evening, when Harris returned home, Esther was in the living room reading a book. She looked up as he entered, her face calm as ever. "You're home early," she remarked. "Yeah," Harris replied, tossing his keys on the table. He searched her face for signs of weakness, of anger, of anything, but found none. The divorce papers still sat unopened on the desk in the corner. "You haven't read them," Harris noted. "I'll get to it," Esther said simply, turning back to her book. "You're not upset?" His tone held disbelief. Esther closed the book gently and met his eyes. "Harris, you've made your choice. You want to be with someone else. There's nothing left to be upset about." Her calmness rattled him. He wanted her to break, to fight, to scream. But instead, she offered nothing but dignity. "Fine," he muttered, heading to the bedroom. But the unease followed him like a shadow. Meanwhile, Sophie's words echoed in his ears. Women don't just smile when their husband leaves them. And for the first time, Harris wondered if he truly understood the woman he was leaving behind. The days after Harris delivered the divorce papers passed in a blur of silence. Harris expected tears. He expected slammed doors, heated arguments, desperate pleas to make him stay. He even rehearsed in his head how he would respond when Esther begged him not to leave. But none of that happened. Instead, Esther remained calm. She woke up each morning, made her tea, read her newspaper, and went about her day as though nothing had changed. The only difference was the unopened envelope on her desk. Each time Harris walked by and saw it, his irritation grew. One evening, he finally snapped. "Are you going to sign them or not?" Esther glanced up from the kitchen counter where she was slicing vegetables. Her face betrayed no emotion. "I told you, Harris. I will sign them. There's no rush, is there?" "No rush," he repeated, his voice sharp. "Esther, I've already told Sophie we'll be free soon. Don't drag this out." Esther set the knife down carefully, then turned to face him. Her calmness unnerved him more than anger ever could. "If you're so eager to move on, Harris, then be patient. You've waited months sneaking around with her. You can wait a few more days." His jaw tightened. "You don't have to be cruel about it." A flicker of a smile touched Esther's lips. "Cruel? I haven't even started." He blinked, startled. "What's that supposed to mean?" But Esther didn't answer. She simply went back to her cooking, humming faintly under her breath. That night, as they sat in the same house but worlds apart, Harris grew restless. Esther's composure was like a mirror reflecting his own guilt back at him. He found himself pacing the bedroom, muttering under his breath, while she sat in the living room, serene and unreadable. In the quiet hours after midnight, Harris peeked into her study while she slept. He wanted to know what she was hiding behind that calm smile. His eyes landed on her desk. The envelope with the divorce papers still sat there, untouched, unbothered. Frustrated, he muttered, "Why won't she just sign?" Little did he know, Esther had already signed them. She had done it days ago, sliding her elegant signature across the page without hesitation. But she hadn't told him. She hadn't given him the satisfaction of knowing. She was letting him stew in uncertainty, letting him wonder, letting him fumble in the silence. Because sometimes silence was louder than screams. 3 weeks later, Harris felt on top of the world. He and Sophie had begun appearing together in public. At first cautiously, quiet dinners, hand-holding in dimly lit bars, but then with more confidence. Sophie loved flaunting their relationship. Harris enjoyed the attention, the whispers, the feeling of being desired and envied. Tonight was a pinnacle, the annual New York Hope Foundation Charity Gala. It was a kind of event where wealthy donors, CEOs, and politicians mingled under chandeliers, trading smiles and promises. Harris had scored an invitation through one of his clients, and Sophie was thrilled. "This is our debut," Sophie said as she adjusted her sparkling red dress in the mirror. "Everyone will see us together. Esther will be old news." Harris smirked. "She's already old news." But as they entered the ballroom, something shifted. The chandeliers glittered above, casting golden light on marble floors. Cameras flashed. The air was thick with perfume and money. Harris walked with Sophie on his arm, proud, chest puffed out. Then the room stilled. Whispers rippled across the crowd. Heads turned toward the grand staircase at the far end of the hall. Esther was standing there. She wore a gown the color of midnight, the fabric hugging her frame with effortless grace. Diamonds glimmered at her neck, but it wasn't the jewelry that silenced the room, it was her presence. She carried herself like royalty, her chin lifted, her eyes calm and commanding. Sophie's grip on Harris's arm tightened. "What is she doing here?" she hissed. Harris froze. His mouth went dry. He had never seen Esther like this. To him, she had always been the quiet wife at home, reading books, cooking dinners, living modestly. But here, she looked like she belonged to this world of wealth and power more than anyone else in the room. The host of the gala, a silver-haired gentleman in a tailored suit, took the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, we are honored tonight to welcome our distinguished guest and lead sponsor, Ms. Esther Harrison, CEO of Harrison Enterprises." The room erupted in applause. Harris's vision blurred. Harrison. Esther walked gracefully across the ballroom, shaking hands with senators, laughing softly with CEOs, photographers flashing around her like she was the center of gravity itself. Sophie turned to Harris, her face pale. "CEO of Harrison Enterprises? That's billions, Harris. Billions." Harris's chest tightened as the truth crashed over him. The Harrison name. The empire. The wealth. All this time, it had been her. His wife. The woman he was so eager to discard. Esther's eyes finally met his across the ballroom. For a fleeting second, their gazes locked. Her expression was calm, unreadable, but the faintest smile tugged at her lips, the same smile she had given him the night he handed her the divorce papers. It wasn't the smile of a broken woman. It was the smile of a victor. Sophie dug her nails into his arm. "You didn't tell me she was rich." I didn't know," Harris whispered hoarsely. Esther moved to the stage as the host invited her to speak. She took the microphone with the grace of someone born for the spotlight. "Good evening," she began, her voice carrying steady and strong across the hall. "It is an honor to stand before you tonight, not only as a supporter of this cause, but as a woman who has learned the importance of letting go." Her eyes swept the room. For a brief moment, they lingered on Harris. "Sometimes," she continued, "we cling to things that no longer serve us. Fear, pain, people. And yet, the moment we let go, we make space for something far greater. Tonight, I stand here not just as a businesswoman, but as someone who has chosen freedom over chains." The crowd erupted in applause. Harris felt the walls close in around him. He heard the whispers of the guests nearby. Wasn't she married to Harris Cooper? He divorced her. What a fool. Imagine leaving Esther Harrison. He must regret it. Sophie pulled away from him, her eyes blazing. "You told me she was nothing. A nobody. Do you realize what you've done?" Harris didn't answer. He couldn't. His pride, his arrogance, his entire world, all of it was crumbling in front of him as Esther shone brighter than ever. And for the first time, Harris Cooper understood. He hadn't divorced Esther. He had divorced his only chance at greatness. The ballroom glittered, but to Harris, it suddenly felt like a prison. The chandeliers above seemed to burn hotter, brighter, casting an unrelenting spotlight on his shame. Everywhere he turned, people whispered, "Wasn't she married to him? He left her for that girl. He divorced Esther Harrison. Imagine the stupidity." The words clung to his skin like oil. He tried to straighten his posture, to hold on to whatever dignity he could muster, but the looks of pity, and worse, ridicule, made it impossible. Sophie stood beside him, her smile frozen but her voice low and venomous. "You didn't know she was rich? You've been married to her for years and you didn't know?" Harris swallowed hard. "She hid it. She never told me. How was I supposed to know? Sophie's eyes blazed with fury. A man with sense would have figured it out. Her mannerisms, her composure, the way she carried herself. She was never ordinary, Harris. Never. He clenched his fists, his pride wounded. Don't talk to me like this. You're acting as if I'm the fool here. Sophie's laugh was sharp, bitter. Oh, you are the fool. Do you hear them? Do you see them looking at us? You didn't just divorce a woman. You divorced an empire. You divorced power. And now everyone knows. Harris looked across the room at Esther. She was surrounded by politicians, CEOs, and media personalities, all eager to shake her hand, to bask in her presence. She didn't even glance his way now. She didn't need to. A wave of heat flushed through him, anger, jealousy, regret all tangled together. How could she hide this from me? He muttered under his breath. 7 years, and she never said a word. Sophie leaned in, her tone mocking. Maybe she knew you'd only love her for her money. Maybe she knew you weren't worthy. The words cut deeper than she realized. The host announced dinner, and the guests moved toward their tables. Harris felt the weight of curious eyes following him. Sophie tugged him toward their assigned seats, but the humiliation only deepened. They were seated at the very edge of the ballroom, far from Esther's prominent table at the front. As Esther walked past, her gown shimmering under the golden lights, Harris stood abruptly. His voice was low, desperate. Esther! She turned her head slightly, meeting his eyes for the briefest moment. Yes, Harris. Why didn't you tell me? His voice cracked despite himself. Why did you hide who you were? A faint smile touched her lips, though her tone remained calm. Because I wanted to know if someone could love me without it. His mouth opened, but no words came. She turned and walked on, leaving him frozen in place. The whispers grew louder in his head, though no one spoke them aloud. You were never worthy. You never saw her for who she was. Beside him, Sophie crossed her arms, her fury simmering. You've ruined everything. And in that moment, Harris realized Sophie didn't see him as a man anymore, only as a failure. The dinner passed in a blur of silver cutlery and polite chatter. Harris barely touched his food. Sophie ate in silence, her eyes darting toward Esther's table again and again. Esther, however, was radiant. Every word she spoke seemed to command attention. People leaned in to hear her. Laughter erupted softly at her gentle jokes. She wasn't just part of the room, she owned it. Midway through the evening, the host tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Ms. Esther Harrison back to the stage. Polite applause filled the room as Esther rose. She moved gracefully, her gown flowing like liquid midnight, and took the microphone. The ballroom hushed instantly. Good evening, she began, her voice calm, steady, and resonant. Tonight is about more than wealth or status. It is about hope, hope for children, for families, for futures we can help shape together. Her eyes swept the audience, connecting with faces, grounding her words. But I want to share something personal tonight. Because sometimes, the greatest lessons don't come from success. They come from loss. Harris's chest tightened. He knew, he just knew, her words were meant for him. There are moments in life when we must let go, Esther continued. Let go of what hurts us. Let go of people who no longer value us. Let go of fear. Because when we release what was holding us down, we finally make room to rise. The crowd erupted in applause, but Esther wasn't finished. She smiled faintly, her voice lowering, carrying a new weight. Some chains are invisible, expectations, lies, betrayals. And when those chains break, we realize they were never made of iron at all. They were made of smoke. Nothing can truly hold us back if we choose freedom. Harris felt the words pierce him. His throat tightened as the audience applauded again, some even rising to their feet. Beside him, Sophie muttered bitterly, She's talking about you. Everyone knows it. Esther concluded her speech with grace. To anyone here tonight who is struggling to let go, know this: your worth is not tied to who stays or who leaves. Your worth is in your own hands. And when you finally choose freedom, you'll realize you were stronger than you ever imagined. The ballroom rose in a standing ovation. Cameras flashed. Reporters scribbled furiously. Esther bowed her head slightly, then stepped down, moving back to her table with calm confidence. Harris slumped in his chair, feeling smaller than he ever had in his life. Sophie's glare burned into him. "Do you hear her? Do you see this?" Sophie hissed. "She's powerful, untouchable. And you're nothing. A man who walked away from a queen for scraps." Harris wanted to shout, to defend himself, to say he hadn't known. But the truth was undeniable. He hadn't seen Esther's worth. He had been too blinded by his own desires, too eager to chase Sophie's shallow praise. Now the whole world saw him for what he was, a man who had thrown away diamonds for stones. Esther, meanwhile, didn't even glance at him again. She didn't need to, because the power had shifted completely. She was free, and Harris was left drowning in the chains he had forged for himself. Harris Cooper woke up 3 mornings after the gala with a pounding headache and an empty bed. Sophie hadn't come home. At first, he thought she was sulking, punishing him for the humiliation they had both endured that night. He told himself she would be back. She needed him as much as he needed her. But when he stumbled into the kitchen, he noticed her clothes were gone. Her makeup, her perfume bottles, her shoes, everything had vanished. On the counter sat a single note written in her delicate handwriting. "I didn't sign up for this. You're not who I thought you were. Don't call me." Harris crumpled the note in his fist, rage boiling in his chest. "Ungrateful," he muttered. "After everything I gave her, she runs." But deep down, he knew Sophie hadn't been wrong. He had promised her the world. He had bragged that Esther would be out of the picture soon, that they'd live lavishly, free of drama. Instead, Sophie had watched him become the laughingstock of the city. He opened his phone, scrolling through messages. His social circle had gone eerily silent. Friends who used to invite him out now ignored his calls. Business partners had withdrawn from deals, one by one. The whispers had spread like wildfire. Harris Cooper, the man who divorced Esther Harrison. By afternoon, his boss called him into the office. "Harris," Mr. Lowell said, his tone clipped, "I'll get straight to it. The firm can't afford to keep you on." "What?" Harris shot up from the chair. "Why? I've been here for 8 years." Lowell adjusted his glasses. "Your image is toxic now. Clients don't want to be associated with you. You've embarrassed the firm. It's not personal, it's business." "Not personal." Harris barked. "You're firing me because I divorced my wife? That's insane." "Not your wife," Lowell corrected. "Esther Harrison. Do you realize how many of our biggest donors and clients sit on boards connected to her company? You burned a bridge with one of the most powerful women in New York. And frankly, you don't bring enough to the table to justify the fallout." Harris felt the ground slide out from under him. "This is ridiculous. You can't." But the conversation was already over. His access card was disabled by the time he left the building. Over the next week, Harris's life unraveled. His savings dwindled faster than he expected. Sophie had bled his accounts with expensive shopping and dinners before leaving. Bills piled up. Calls from creditors came daily. One evening, as he sat in his darkened apartment with unopened mail scattered on the floor, he saw Esther's face on the television. She was giving an interview. "Ms. Harrison," the reporter asked, "people are calling you a symbol of strength after your recent personal challenges. How do you feel about that?" Esther's serene smile filled the screen. "Strength is not in never falling. It's in rising again, no matter how many times you're pushed down. I don't consider myself a symbol. I'm simply a woman who knows her worth now." The audience clapped. The camera cut to her walking out of the studio, shaking hands with fans who had gathered outside. Harris threw his remote across the room, shattering it against the wall. "How dare she act like she won," he growled. But the truth ate at him. She had won. He was broke, unemployed, abandoned. She was richer, stronger, and more admired than ever. And the world was laughing at him. Esther Harrison sat on the balcony of her penthouse, the city skyline stretching endlessly before her. The sun was setting, casting hues of gold and crimson across the glass towers. A soft breeze played with her hair as she sipped her tea. Her phone buzzed with messages, congratulations from colleagues, invitations to galas, offers for interviews. She set it aside. Tonight, she didn't want to think about business. Tonight was about peace. For years, she had carried the weight of her marriage, pretending everything was fine while Harris drifted further away. She had sacrificed her truth, her name, her wealth, to test if love could survive without it. And now she knew the answer. She hadn't lost. She had simply been set free. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. It was Mr. Grant, her lawyer and lifelong family friend. "You look peaceful," he said warmly as he stepped onto the balcony. "I feel peaceful," Esther admitted. He handed her a folder. "The final paperwork. The divorce is officially processed. You're free." Esther opened the folder, scanning the papers. Her signature stared back at her, crisp and elegant. With one last breath, she closed the folder and set it aside. "It's funny," she murmured. "I thought this moment would feel heavier. But it doesn't. It feels light." Mr. Grant nodded. "That's because you let go long before the ink dried." They sat in silence for a moment, watching the sun dip lower. Finally, Esther spoke. "Do you think he'll ever understand what he threw away?" Grant's expression was kind, but firm. "It doesn't matter if he does. That's no longer your story. That's his burden to carry." Esther smiled faintly. She knew he was right. Harris's downfall was his own creation. She didn't need to dwell on it. Later that night, she stood by the window, gazing at the city lights twinkling below. She whispered softly to herself, almost like a vow. "The best decision I ever made was signing those divorce papers." Across town, Harris sat in his dingy apartment, the walls closing in. He scrolled through his phone, but no one answered his calls. His accounts were nearly empty. Sophie's perfume still lingered faintly on the abandoned clothes she had left behind. He thought of Esther, of the way she smiled at the gala, the way the crowd rose to its feet for her. He thought of the life he could have had if he hadn't been so blinded by greed and ego. And for the first time, he wept. But Esther never looked back. She had already moved on. So what do you think? Did Harris get exactly what he deserved? Or did Esther's silence cut deeper than revenge itself? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And if you loved this story of betrayal and hidden strength, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more twists, and turn on the notification bell, because the next story might shock you even more.